It was a cold and stormy night when Sam realized he was running low on fuel. The winding back roads of rural Pennsylvania were unfamiliar to him, and the relentless rain made it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. His eyes strained to make out the silhouette of a gas station sign through the downpour, a faint glimmer of hope in the otherwise oppressive darkness. Sam was a traveling salesman, the kind who made his living driving from town to town, peddling wares and sleeping in cheap motels. He was used to the loneliness of the open road, but tonight felt different. There was an unsettling stillness in the air, as if the world was holding its breath. As he approached the gas station, Sam could see that it was an old, decrepit place. The sign, once bright and inviting, now hung crookedly, its neon letters flickering intermittently. He pulled up to one of the pumps and turned off the engine, the sudden silence almost deafening. The station was eerily quiet. No other cars were around, and the only sound was the relentless pounding of the rain. Sam stepped out of his car and quickly made his way to the pump, shivering as the cold rain soaked through his clothes. He fumbled with his wallet, trying to extract a credit card with numb fingers. After several frustrating attempts, he managed to insert the card into the reader. To his relief, the pump came to life with a beep, and he started to fill his tank. As he stood there, he glanced around, noticing the rundown condition of the place. The windows of the small convenience store were dirty and cracked, and the lights inside flickered ominously. Sam's unease grew. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He tried to reassure himself that it was just his imagination, the result of a long day on the road and the unsettling atmosphere. But when he glanced up at the store's window again, he could have sworn he saw a shadow move inside. Deciding to go inside to pay and maybe grab a cup of coffee to keep him awake for the remainder of his journey, Sam walked towards the convenience store. The bell above the door jingled as he entered, and he was hit with the smell of stale air and mildew. The interior was dimly lit, the shelves sparsely stocked with dusty goods. Behind the counter stood an old man with a gaunt face and hollow eyes that seemed to pierce right through Sam. His presence was unsettling, to say the least. "Evening," Sam greeted, trying to sound casual. The old man nodded but said nothing. Sam browsed the aisles, picking up a bottle of water and a pack of gum. As he approached the counter to pay, he noticed a newspaper lying open, its front page dominated by a headline about a series of mysterious disappearances in the area. He felt a shiver run down his spine. "You hear about these disappearances?" Sam asked, attempting to make conversation. The old man's gaze remained fixed on him, unblinking. "People go missing all the time," he replied in a raspy voice. "Especially on nights like this." Sam felt a knot form in his stomach. "What do you mean?" "Storms bring out the worst in this place," the old man said cryptically. "Best you fill up and move on quickly." Sam nodded, paid for his items, and turned to leave. As he walked back to his car, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He finished filling his tank, got back into his car, and started the engine. The gas station receded into the darkness behind him as he drove away. The rain had eased up slightly, but the night was still pitch black. Sam's headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating the narrow, winding road ahead. He kept glancing in his rearview mirror, half expecting to see something, or someone, following him. His unease grew with each passing mile. The road seemed to stretch on endlessly, with no signs of civilization in sight. The trees on either side loomed menacingly, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to snatch him. Suddenly, his car started to sputter. The engine coughed and wheezed before dying completely, leaving Sam stranded in the middle of nowhere. He cursed under his breath and tried to restart the engine, but it was no use. The car was dead. Sam grabbed his flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the night. He popped the hood and shone the light inside, but his limited knowledge of cars didn't help. Everything looked fine, but the engine refused to start. As he stood there, contemplating his next move, he heard a rustling noise coming from the trees. His heart raced as he turned, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of movement. "Hello?" he called out, his voice trembling slightly. There was no response, just the eerie silence of the forest. Sam decided to wait in the car until morning. He got back in, locked the doors, and tried to make himself comfortable. The rain had stopped, but the air was still damp and cold. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself and settled in for a long, uneasy night. Hours passed, and Sam drifted in and out of a restless sleep. Every little noise jolted him awake, his mind conjuring up all sorts of terrifying scenarios. The darkness outside seemed to press in on him, suffocating and oppressive. Just as he was starting to doze off again, he was jolted awake by a loud thud. His heart pounded in his chest as he looked around, trying to locate the source of the noise. The flashlight beam revealed nothing, but he knew he hadn't imagined it. Then he heard it again, a distinct, rhythmic thudding, coming from somewhere nearby. Sam's pulse quickened as he realized it was coming from the trunk of his car. Swallowing his fear, he grabbed the flashlight and cautiously got out of the car. He walked to the back and, with trembling hands, opened the trunk. What he saw made his blood run cold. Lying inside was a young woman, bound and gagged, her eyes wide with terror. She was bruised and battered, and it was clear she had been there for some time. Sam quickly untied her and helped her out of the trunk. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice shaking. The woman nodded weakly, too exhausted to speak. Sam helped her into the passenger seat and then got back behind the wheel. He tried the engine again, but it was still dead. Panic set in as he realized they were stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no way to call for help. Suddenly, the sound of an engine approached from behind. Sam's relief was short-lived as he saw a pair of headlights growing brighter in the rearview mirror. He hoped it was a passing motorist, someone who could help them, but something about the way the vehicle was speeding towards them made him uneasy. The car screeched to a halt just a few feet behind them, and a figure stepped out. It was the old man from the gas station. His face was twisted into a sinister grin as he approached Sam's car, a large knife gleaming in his hand. Sam's mind raced. He had to protect the woman and himself. With no other options, he grabbed the tire iron from the trunk and stepped out to face the old man. "Stay away from us," Sam shouted, trying to sound braver than he felt. The old man laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Sam's spine. "You should have listened," he said. "Should have left when you had the chance." Sam swung the tire iron, but the old man was surprisingly quick. He dodged the blow and lunged at Sam, the knife slicing through the air. Sam managed to block the attack and push the old man away, but he knew he couldn't keep this up for long. Just then, the woman appeared beside him, holding the flashlight like a club. She swung it at the old man, catching him off guard and knocking him to the ground. Sam didn't waste any time. He grabbed the woman's hand and together they ran into the forest, the old man's enraged screams echoing behind them. The forest was dense and disorienting, but Sam and the woman didn't stop. They ran through the underbrush, branches scratching at their skin, until they could no longer hear the old man's screams. Finally, they collapsed by a fallen tree, gasping for breath. "Who are you?" Sam asked once they had caught their breath. "And what happened to you?" The woman took a deep breath before answering. "My name is Emily. I was hitchhiking when that man picked me up. He seemed nice at first, but then he took me to that gas station and locked me in the trunk. I've been there for days." Sam felt a surge of anger. "We need to find help," he said. "We can't let him get away with this." Emily nodded. "There's a town not too far from here," she said. "If we keep moving, we should reach it by morning." They set off again, moving as quickly and quietly as they could. The forest seemed to stretch on forever, but eventually, they saw the faint glow of streetlights in the distance. They pushed forward, fueled by a mix of fear and determination. As they reached the edge of the forest and stepped onto a paved road, they were relieved to see a small diner up ahead. They made their way inside, where a kind waitress quickly called the police. The police arrived within minutes, taking Sam and Emily's statements and dispatching officers to the gas station. They found the old man's car, but he was nowhere to be seen. A search of the area turned up several bodies buried in shallow graves behind the station, victims of the old man's twisted games. Sam and Emily were taken to the hospital, where they were treated for their injuries. The ordeal had left them both shaken, but they were grateful to be alive. In the weeks that followed, Sam couldn't stop thinking about that night. He had always considered himself a solitary man, content with his life on the road. But now, he felt a sense of purpose, a need to help others who might find themselves in similar situations. He reached out to Emily, and together they started an organization to support victims of violent crimes and raise awareness about the dangers of hitchhiking and traveling alone. Their experience became a cautionary tale, a reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places. And as for the old man, he was never found. Some say he still roams the back roads, looking for his next victim. But Sam and Emily knew that they had survived something truly horrific, and they were determined to ensure that others would be warned and protected. Despite their best efforts to move on with their lives, the events of that night haunted Sam and Emily. They continued their work, but the fear that the old man was still out there lingered. They couldn't shake the feeling that their ordeal wasn't over. One evening, a few months after their escape, Emily received a phone call. It was a local sheriff, informing her that they had found a car matching the description of the old man's vehicle abandoned on the outskirts of town. The news sent a chill down her spine. Sam and Emily met with the sheriff the next morning. The car had been found near an old, disused cabin deep in the woods. It was a place known for its dark history and was believed to be haunted. The sheriff's department was planning to search the cabin, and they invited Sam and Emily to join them. As they approached the cabin, the atmosphere grew heavy with tension. The building was in a state of disrepair, its windows boarded up and the roof sagging. The sheriff and his deputies forced the door open, and they all stepped inside. The interior was just as dilapidated as the exterior. Dust-covered furniture and cobwebs filled the rooms, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. They searched the cabin methodically, looking for any signs of the old man or evidence that might explain his disappearance. In one of the back rooms, they found a trapdoor leading to a basement. The sheriff pried it open, revealing a dark staircase descending into the earth. Sam and Emily exchanged a worried glance before following the deputies down the stairs. The basement was cold and damp, with stone walls and a dirt floor. In the center of the room was a large wooden crate, secured with heavy chains and a padlock. The sheriff's deputy used bolt cutters to snap the chains and open the crate. Inside, they found a collection of old photographs, each one depicting a different victim. The images were haunting, showing terrified faces and scenes of unimaginable horror. Among the photographs was a journal, filled with the old man's ramblings and detailed accounts of his crimes. As they flipped through the journal, they discovered that the old man had been active for decades, his killing spree spanning generations. He had moved from town to town, always staying one step ahead of the law. The journal also revealed his obsession with Sam and Emily, describing them as his greatest escapees. The final entry in the journal was dated the night they had escaped. It detailed his plans to recapture them and finish what he had started. But there were no clues as to his current whereabouts. The discovery of the journal sent shockwaves through the community. The police intensified their search, but the old man remained elusive. Sam and Emily knew they had to be vigilant, always looking over their shoulders and staying prepared for the possibility that he might return. The following months were a period of intense vigilance for Sam and Emily. They never felt truly safe, even in their own homes. They installed security systems, kept weapons nearby, and never went anywhere alone. The fear of the old man's return cast a shadow over every aspect of their lives. Despite the constant fear, they continued their work with the organization, using their story to raise awareness and support others. They gave interviews, spoke at events, and wrote articles, always emphasizing the importance of being cautious and prepared. One evening, while working late at the office, Sam received an anonymous email. It contained a single sentence, "I'm still watching." The email sent chills down his spine, confirming his worst fears that the old man was still out there, and still fixated on them. Sam immediately contacted the police, who traced the email to a public library in a nearby town. Surveillance footage showed a man matching the old man's description using the computer, but by the time the police arrived, he was long gone. The incident only heightened their anxiety. Sam and Emily became more determined to catch the old man and put an end to the nightmare once and for all. They worked closely with the police, providing any information that might help track him down. Months turned into a year, and the hunt for the old man continued. Sam and Emily's lives were a constant battle between fear and determination. They refused to let the old man win, but the psychological toll was immense. Then, one night, Emily's phone rang. It was the sheriff, informing her that they had finally found a lead. A man fitting the old man's description had been spotted at another remote gas station, not far from where they had first encountered him. Sam and Emily joined the sheriff and his deputies as they set out to apprehend the old man. They arrived at the gas station just before dawn, the early morning light casting long shadows across the empty lot. The gas station was eerily similar to the one from that fateful night. As they approached, they saw the old man standing by one of the pumps, filling his tank. He looked up and met their gaze, a sinister smile spreading across his face. The police surrounded him, weapons drawn. The old man didn't resist. He raised his hands in surrender, but the look in his eyes told Sam and Emily that this wasn't over. As the deputies cuffed him and led him to the patrol car, the old man turned to Sam and Emily. "You think you've won," he said, his voice low and menacing. "But this is far from over. I'll always be with you, in your minds, in your dreams. You can never escape me." The old man was taken into custody, and the evidence from his journal ensured that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Sam and Emily felt a sense of relief, but his words continued to haunt them. They knew that the scars of their ordeal would never fully heal. The memories of that night, the terror, and the uncertainty would stay with them forever. But they also knew that they had survived, and they had each other. Together, they continued their work, helping others find strength in the face of fear. They used their experience to teach others about resilience and the importance of never giving up, no matter how dark the night may seem. And though the shadows of their past lingered, Sam and Emily found solace in knowing that they had faced true evil and emerged stronger. Their story became a beacon of hope for others, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is always a way to find the light. It was a typical Friday night when Jake decided to drive down to his parents' lake house. It had been a long week at work, and he desperately needed the break. The drive was familiar, he had done it countless times before, but this time, something felt off. As he cruised down the highway, the radio played soft rock tunes that barely masked the unsettling silence of the night. The clock on the dashboard read 10:30 p.m., and the road stretched out before him, illuminated by the dim glow of his headlights. The route to the lake house took him through a series of small towns and dense forests, a path that was both beautiful and eerie in the dead of night. Jake had always enjoyed the solitude of driving alone at night. It gave him time to think, to unwind. But tonight, the darkness seemed to press in on him, making him feel uneasy. He chalked it up to exhaustion and kept driving, eager to reach his destination. An hour into his drive, Jake noticed a figure standing by the side of the road. As he got closer, he saw it was a woman, drenched from the rain that had started pouring a few minutes ago. She was waving frantically, trying to flag him down. Despite his reservations, Jake slowed down and pulled over. "Thank you so much for stopping," the woman said, her voice trembling. "My car broke down, and I need a ride to the next town." Jake hesitated. He had always been cautious about picking up strangers, especially at night. But the woman looked genuinely distressed, and he couldn't just leave her there. "Sure, get in," he said, unlocking the passenger door. "I'm heading to Lakeville." "Is that where you need to go?" The woman nodded and climbed into the car, water dripping from her clothes onto the seat. She shivered and hugged herself, trying to get warm. "Thank you," she repeated. "My name is Emily." "Jake," he replied, giving her a small smile. "We'll be in Lakeville in about half an hour." As they drove, Jake tried to make conversation to ease the tension. Emily was polite but seemed distracted, constantly glancing out the window. The rain had picked up, and the rhythmic sound of the wipers added to the eerie atmosphere. They had been driving for about 20 minutes when they reached a stretch of road that was even darker and more isolated than the rest. The trees seemed to close in around them, and the headlights barely pierced the thickening fog. Suddenly, a loud thud came from the front of the car, followed by a screeching noise. Jake's heart raced as he slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a halt. "What was that?" Emily asked, her voice shaky. "I don't know," Jake replied, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Stay here. I'll go check." He stepped out into the rain, the cold drops soaking through his clothes almost instantly. He walked to the front of the car, his breath visible in the chilly night. The headlights revealed a large branch lying across the road, its jagged edges suggesting it had been torn from a tree by the storm. Jake sighed with relief. It wasn't a flat tire or engine trouble, just a fallen branch. He moved to the side of the road to drag it out of the way when he heard a rustling sound coming from the forest. He froze, straining to see anything beyond the glow of the headlights. "Hello?" he called out, but only the sound of rain answered him. He quickly moved the branch and hurried back to the car, glancing over his shoulder as he did. The forest felt alive, as if it was watching him. He got back in and locked the doors. "Just a branch," he said, forcing a smile. "We're good to go." But as he started the car and drove off, a feeling of unease settled in the pit of his stomach. They continued in silence, the tension in the car palpable. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something lurking in the darkness behind. Emily seemed to sense his unease. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, just, this road is creepier than I remember," Jake replied, trying to sound casual. "We're almost there." As they neared Lakeville, the rain began to let up, and the fog started to thin. Jake let out a sigh of relief, but his relief was short-lived. Just as they were about to enter the town, the car's engine sputtered and died. "Are you kidding me?" Jake muttered, turning the key in the ignition to no avail. "Not now." Emily looked worried. "What do we do now?" "I'll check under the hood," Jake said, stepping out of the car once more. He popped the hood and peered inside, but he wasn't much of a mechanic. Everything looked fine, but the car wouldn't start. As he was about to give up, he heard the rustling sound again, this time closer. He looked around, but the darkness revealed nothing. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw a shadow move at the edge of the forest. "Emily," he called, trying to keep his voice steady. "We need to get out of here." "What's wrong?" she asked, stepping out of the car. "I think we're being followed," Jake said, his eyes scanning the trees. Emily's face went pale. "By who?" "I don't know, but we can't stay here," Jake said, grabbing his phone to call for help. But there was no signal. "Damn it. We should walk to Lakeville," Emily suggested, her voice trembling. "It's not far. We can find help there." Jake nodded, and they started walking down the road, leaving the car behind. Every step felt heavier, and the darkness seemed to close in around them. As they walked, Jake kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see something, or someone, following them. The road was eerily quiet, the only sound their footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. After what felt like an eternity, they saw the faint outline of a house in the distance. It was old and decrepit, with boarded-up windows and a sagging, but it was shelter, and they needed to get out of the open. "Let's go there," Jake said, pointing to the house. "Are you sure?" Emily asked, looking at the dilapidated structure. "It's better than staying out here," Jake replied. They approached the house cautiously, the wooden steps creaking under their weight. Jake pushed the door open, and it swung in with a loud groan. The inside was dark and musty, with cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. They stepped inside, closing the door behind them. Jake found an old lantern on a table and managed to light it, casting a dim glow around the room. It looked like no one had been there in years. "This place gives me the creeps," Emily said, hugging herself. "Yeah, me too," Jake admitted. "But it's better than being out there." They sat down, trying to make themselves comfortable. Jake kept the lantern close, its flickering light the only thing keeping the darkness. As they sat in the old house, Jake tried to come up with a plan. They couldn't stay there forever, and they needed to find help. But the feeling of being watched persisted, and he couldn't shake the sense of dread that had settled over him. "Do you think whoever, or whatever, is out there will find us here?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Jake replied honestly. "But we need to be ready in case they do." He searched the house for anything that could be used as a weapon. He found an old, rusty knife in the kitchen and handed it to Emily. "Just in case," he said. Emily took the knife, her hands trembling. "Do you think we'll make it to Lakeville?" "We have to," Jake said, trying to sound confident. "Once the rain stops, we'll head out again." They sat in silence, listening to the rain as it gradually lessened. Hours passed, and the storm finally moved on, leaving an eerie calm in its wake. "Let's go," Jake said, standing up. "We need to move before it gets dark again." Emily nodded, and they stepped out into the cold night air. The sky was clear, and the moon cast a pale light over the landscape. They started walking towards Lakeville, their pace quickening as they left the old house behind. As they walked, Jake kept his eyes on the road ahead, but his mind kept drifting back to the figure he had seen in the forest. Who or what was it? And why were they being followed? They were almost at Lakeville when Jake heard the rustling sound again. This time, it was accompanied by a low growl. He turned, his heart pounding, and saw a pair of glowing eyes staring at them from the darkness. "Run," he shouted, grabbing Emily's hand. They sprinted down the road, the sound of footsteps and growls growing louder behind them. Jake's mind raced as he tried to come up with a plan. They couldn't outrun whatever was chasing them, and they had nowhere to hide. Just as they were about to reach the edge of the town, Emily stumbled. Jake stopped and helped her up, but it was too late. The creature was upon them. It emerged from the shadows, a hulking figure covered in matted fur, with sharp claws and glowing eyes. It growled, baring its teeth, and lunged at them. Jake swung his lantern at the creature, but it knocked it out of his hand with a swipe of its claw. He grabbed a rock from the ground and threw it, hitting the creature in the face. It howled in pain, giving them a brief moment to escape. "Run to the town!" Jake shouted, pushing Emily ahead of him. They ran as fast as they could, the creature hot on their heels. Just as they reached the first house in Lakeville, the creature pounced. Jake turned and faced it, ready to fight. But before the creature could strike, a shot rang out. The creature yelped and fell to the ground, writhing in pain. Jake looked up and saw a man standing on the porch of the house, holding a shotgun. "Get inside, now," the man shouted. Jake and Emily didn't need to be told twice. They ran into the house, slamming the door behind them. The man locked it and turned to face them. "Are you two okay?" he asked, his face etched with concern. "We're fine, thanks to you," Jake said, breathing heavily. "What was that thing?" The man shook his head. "No one knows for sure. But it's been stalking these woods for years. You're lucky to be alive." The man introduced himself as Tom, a longtime resident of Lakeville. He explained that the creature had been a local legend for decades, responsible for numerous disappearances and deaths. The townspeople had learned to avoid the woods at night, but outsiders were often unaware of the danger. Tom gave Jake and Emily blankets and some food, and they sat by the fire, trying to warm up. They were safe for now, but the experience had shaken them to the core. "What do we do now?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "We wait until morning," Tom said. "Then I'll take you to the sheriff. He needs to know what happened." Jake and Emily nodded, grateful for the man's help. They spent the night in the safety of Tom's home, the events of the night replaying in their minds. As dawn broke, they prepared to leave. Tom led them to the sheriff's office, where they recounted their harrowing experience. The sheriff took their statement seriously and promised to investigate. Jake and Emily were exhausted but relieved. They had survived the night, and with the help of the townspeople, they hoped to find answers about the creature that had terrorized them. As they left the sheriff's office, Jake turned to Emily. "Are you okay?" She nodded, though she still looked shaken. "I will be. Thanks for saving me, Jake." He smiled, relieved that they had made it through the night. "We saved each other." They left Lakeville together, determined to put the nightmare behind them. But the memory of that night would stay with them forever, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond